Welcome to Underwire History. In Berlin, Johann von Hohenzollern becomes the new Elector of Brandenburg, the independent electorate within the Holy Roman Empire, upon the death of his father, the Elector Albrecht III Achilles, unfolded through interacting constraints rather than one isolated trigger. Decision-makers operated within institutional limits, and each response narrowed the next available option. The evidence points to compounding risk rather than a single dramatic cause. That causal chain becomes clearer when incentives, governance, and timing are read together. Johann von Hohenzollern inherits a fragile economy, strained by recurring famines and crippling debts from his father's ill-fated wars with the Teutonic Knights. The new elector faces mounting pressure to restore stability, but every attempt to address one problem worsens another, demonstrating the inherent flaws in the electorate's governance structure. Brandenburg's delicate balance of power within the Holy Roman Empire is further threatened by the encroaching influence of neighboring states like Poland and Prussia. The elector must navigate a complex web of alliances and rivalries without sacrificing Brandenburg's independence or sovereignty. As he grapples with these external pressures, Johann von Hohenzollern also confronts internal challenges. Court factions vying for power, an increasingly burdened nobility, and the looming specter of peasant uprisings. The elector's decisions will have far-reaching consequences, shaping not only Brandenburg's future, but also its relationships within the empire and beyond. With each choice, Johann von Hohenzollern tightens the noose around his own freedom to act, illustrating how constraints can accumulate into crushing pressure. As we'll see in the coming chapters, these escalating tensions will eventually boil over, reshaping the course of European history. Johann von Hohenzollern becomes the new Elector of Brandenburg upon the death of his father, Albrecht III Achilles. This event sparks a chain reaction within the electorate's fragile economy, strained by recurring famines and crippling debts from past conflicts with the Teutonic Knights. The new elector faces mounting pressure to restore stability, but every attempt to address one problem exacerbates another, exposing inherent flaws in Brandenburg's governance structure. Johann von Hohenzollern must navigate this complex web of alliances and rivalries without sacrificing his electorate's independence or sovereignty. He also confronts internal challenges, court factions vying for power, a burdened nobility, and the looming specter of peasant uprisings, all of which will test his leadership skills. As he grapples with these escalating tensions, Johann von Hohenzollern tightens the noose around his own freedom to act, illustrating how constraints can accumulate into crushing pressure. This precarious situation will eventually boil over, reshaping the course of European history in ways yet unknown. The electorate's economy teetered on the brink of collapse, exacerbated by recurring famines and crippling debts from past conflicts with the Teutonic Knights. Johann von Hohenzollern's decision to assume power came at a critical juncture, as he faced mounting pressure to restore stability and maintain his electorate's independence within the Holy Roman Empire. The new elector was caught between competing interests: the nobility's demands for greater autonomy, the peasantry's simmering resentment, and the need to appease powerful allies like the Habsburgs. Every attempt to address one problem risked exacerbating another, illustrating the inherent flaws in Brandenburg's governance structure and Johann's own limited authority. With each decision, he tightened the noose around his freedom to act, illustrating how institutional constraints can accumulate into crushing pressure, even for those in positions of power. Johann von Hohenzollern's leadership would be tested as never before, forcing him to navigate treacherous alliances and rivalries without sacrificing his electorate's sovereignty or autonomy. This precarious situation set the stage for a chain reaction that would eventually boil over, reshaping the course of European history in ways yet unknown. Modern relevance reshaped what decision-makers could do next, because each institutional response changed the incentives facing the next actor. The Habsburgs, in particular, held significant influence over Brandenburg's foreign policy, which created tension within the Holy Roman Empire and between the electorates themselves. Johann von Hohenzollern's relationship with the Habsburgs would become a crucial factor in his ability to navigate these complex webs of power and maintain his electorate's independence. In this delicate balance of power, every move Johann made had far-reaching consequences, influencing not only Brandenburg but also neighboring states within the Holy Roman Empire. This intricate dance of alliances and rivalries was further complicated by the rise of other regional powers, such as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which began to challenge Habsburg dominance in Eastern Europe. The Elector's predicament, was also influenced by the Catholic Church's growing influence in Brandenburg. As a result, Johann von Hohenzollern found himself bound by both temporal and spiritual obligations, making it increasingly difficult to assert his authority as an independent leader. In 1606, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth launched a military campaign against the Tsardom of Russia, drawing Brandenburg into the conflict through its alliance with the Commonwealth. This entanglement with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth further strained Johann's relationship with the Habsburgs, who were traditional rivals of the Commonwealth. The elector's court was filled with advisors from various European nations, including France and England, each pushing their own agendas and influencing Brandenburg's foreign policy in subtle yet significant ways. Johann von Hohenzollern's responses to these pressures ultimately shaped the course of European history, often unintentionally, as he sought to maintain his electorate's sovereignty amidst the complex web of alliances and rivalries. The Catholic Church's influence in Brandenburg was largely due to its strategic location along key trade routes between Western Europe and Russia. This proximity made it an attractive target for missionaries, resulting in a significant influx of Catholic priests and the establishment of numerous churches and monasteries within the electorate. Johann von Hohenzollern's attempts to maintain balance with the Church were further complicated by his own Lutheran faith and the growing tensions between Protestant and Catholic states within the Holy Roman Empire. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, seeking to expand its influence in Eastern Europe, negotiated a secret treaty with Brandenburg in 1609, solidifying their alliance and potentially threatening Habsburg dominance in the region. Its development was met with suspicion by the Habsburgs, who responded by strengthening their own ties with Catholic states within the empire, further polarizing the Holy Roman Empire's politics. As tensions escalated, Johann von Hohenzollern found himself caught between his obligations to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and his loyalty to the Holy Roman Empire, forcing him to make difficult decisions that would have far-reaching consequences for Brandenburg and beyond. The elector's advisors, sensing an opportunity for advancement, began to manipulate these delicate relationships, often using their foreign connections to influence Johann's decisions and further their own interests. In 1610, a delegation from the Swedish Empire arrived in Brandenburg, seeking an alliance with Johann von Hohenzollern against the Habsburgs, adding another layer of complexity to the elector's predicament as he navigated these treacherous waters. The elector's advisors, sensing an opportunity for advancement, began to manipulate these delicate relationships, often using their foreign connections to influence Johann's decisions and further their own interests. In 1610, a delegation from the Swedish Empire arrived in Brandenburg, seeking an alliance with Johann von Hohenzollern against the Habsburgs, adding another layer of complexity to the elector's predicament as he navigated these treacherous waters. As tensions continued to escalate, Johann found himself facing increasing pressure from multiple directions, with each new development forcing him to reevaluate his options and make difficult choices that would have far-reaching consequences for Brandenburg and beyond. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth's secret treaty with Brandenburg in 1609 had already begun to bear fruit, as the elector's relationship with the Habsburgs continued to deteriorate, further straining the fragile balance of power within the Holy Roman Empire. Johann von Hohenzollern's attempts to maintain neutrality in this complex web of alliances and rivalries were becoming increasingly difficult to sustain, as he faced growing criticism from both Protestant and Catholic states for his perceived indecisiveness. The Elector's court was filled with advisors from various European nations, each pushing their own agendas and influencing Brandenburg's foreign policy in subtle yet significant ways, further limiting Johann's ability to act independently and assert his authority as an independent leader. As the situation continued to spiral out of control, Johann von Hohenzollern's options began to narrow, forcing him to confront the very real possibility that his electorate might be absorbed into a larger power, losing its sovereignty and autonomy in the process. The elector's predicament was further complicated by the growing economic crisis within Brandenburg, as trade disruptions and tariffs imposed by neighboring states began to take their toll on the economy, threatening the very stability of the electorate. In 1611, a devastating famine struck Brandenburg, exacerbating the economic crisis and further straining Johann's relationships with his advisors and foreign partners. The elector was forced to implement austerity measures, including the sale of public lands and the reduction of state expenses, in an effort to mitigate the effects of the famine and stabilize the economy. However, these measures had unintended consequences, leading to widespread discontent among the population and further eroding Johann's authority as a leader. The fallout from these events was far-reaching, with the elector's reputation suffering significantly as a result of his perceived inability to effectively manage the crisis. In 1612, a delegation of Brandenburg nobles arrived in Warsaw, seeking an audience with King Sigismund III of Poland-Lithuania to express their discontent with Johann's leadership and demand greater autonomy for the electorate within the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. This move was seen as a direct challenge to Johann's authority, forcing him to confront the possibility that his own people might turn against him in favor of closer ties with the Commonwealth. The elector's predicament had reached a critical point, with multiple forces pulling him in different directions and threatening the very stability of Brandenburg and beyond. The electorate was heavily indebted to several European powers, including the Habsburgs and the French, which further constrained Johann's ability to act independently. The economic crisis within Brandenburg had a disproportionate impact on the peasantry, who bore the brunt of the trade disruptions and tariffs imposed by neighboring states. In 1610, the elector established a commission to investigate the causes of the economic downturn and identify potential solutions, but its findings were widely disputed among Johann's advisors and foreign partners. The famine that struck Brandenburg in 1611 was particularly devastating in rural areas, where crop failures and livestock diseases exacerbated the economic crisis and led to widespread poverty and starvation. The elector's sale of public lands and reduction of state expenses had a significant impact on the local economy, leading to a decline in investment and a decrease in tax revenue for Brandenburg. King Sigismund III of Poland-Lithuania was keenly aware of the electorate's plight and saw an opportunity to expand his own influence within the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth by offering aid and support to Johann's government. Thanks for listening to Underwire History. Look forward to seeing you next time.